something unimaginable has happened inside Buckingham Palace. In a shocking twist, the royal family has confirmed a heartbreaking development that has left the entire world in stunned disbelief. The announcement came without warning, shaking Britain to its very core and sending ripples of grief cascading across the globe, from London to Sydney and beyond. For generations, the palace has stood as a symbol of stability, strength, and continuity. But tonight, that image lies in ruins. The question burning on everyone's lips is simple. What truly happened behind those royal gates? Stay with us as we uncover the full story of this tragic day, a day that has changed the monarchy forever. Before we dive deeper, subscribe, share your thoughts below, and get ready for a moment the world will never forget. The morning began quietly, deceptively calm, the kind of morning that gave no hint of the storm about to crash through the palace walls. The sun rose over Buckingham Palace, spilling soft golden light across the courtyard as staff went about their usual routines. But something felt off. The rhythm of the palace, usually precise and calm, seemed strangely disturbed. Phones rang earlier than usual. Meetings vanished from schedules. Senior aides moved briskly through the corridors, faces tight and tense. A strange stillness hung in the air, broken only by hurried footsteps and whispers that died out whenever someone passed by, leaving a sense of unease that no one could ignore. By mid-morning, unease had settled like a heavy fog. Staff who normally greeted each other with polite smiles now avoided eye contact. Messages were no longer sent through emails but delivered personally. The communications team, normally visible and relaxed, had vanished behind locked doors. Outside, reporters stationed near the gates began to notice unusual and suspicious activity. Security vehicles arrived in clusters. Staff entered through rarely used side doors. Guards shifted positions without explanation. Something serious had happened inside those walls, serious enough to disturb the palace's unshakable order. By noon, whispers reached the press. Journalists spoke cautiously, relying only on fragments of information, trying to piece together the chaos. One called it a significant development, another described it as deeply troubling. Within an hour, speculation spiraled into utter chaos. Social media flooded with wild rumors, each more dramatic than the last. For the first time in years, even veteran royal correspondents admitted they didn't know what was happening inside the palace. Then, without warning, the royal website went offline. Moments later, it returned, bearing the truth. The statement was simple: black text on a white background framed by the royal crest. Brief, yet carrying the weight of history. It read, "A deeply distressing and heartbreaking development has occurred within the royal family." It expressed sorrow, thanked the public for their concern, and asked for privacy as the family faced an unimaginable moment. No details, no explanations, just the quiet, gut-punching acknowledgement of tragedy. The effect was immediate. Television anchors broke into live programming. Phones buzzed across offices and schools. People stopped mid-action to read the words themselves. Crowds began forming at the palace gates, faces pale and silent. Reporters spoke in hushed tones, cameras capturing the growing sea of mourners. Guards stood at their posts, stillness now more a reflection of grief than discipline. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Staff who had served for decades said they had never seen the palace so quiet. Some were quietly dismissed, others told to remain in place until further notice. Corridors that once echoed with conversation now stretched endlessly, lined with unanswered questions and faces marked by disbelief. By evening, the news had spread far beyond Britain. From Washington to Sydney, headlines echoed the same haunting phrase: tragedy in the palace. The world waited, but Buckingham Palace offered nothing beyond that first statement. Behind its grand walls, history seemed to falter. The unthinkable had happened, and the heart of the monarchy would never beat the same again. A message wrapped in mourning. When it appeared online, the world seemed to hold its breath. No warning, no preparation, just the sudden appearance of the royal crest and a few lines that would alter the course of the day. The statement was brief but devastating, carrying the weight of grief in every carefully chosen word. It spoke of an event that had deeply shaken the family and left the nation in mourning. The tone was unlike anything the palace had ever released. Not formal, not distant, but trembling, human, and raw. Within minutes, television programs across Britain were interrupted. Anchors spoke in solemn voices, pale and uncertain, as the message was read aloud on every network, filling homes and offices with disbelief. The words were calm, yet unbearably heavy, carefully crafted but unable to mask the sorrow behind them. The royal household, long seen as a fortress of composure, sounded fragile. In those few sentences, the monarchy revealed not only tragedy, but emotion, and the people could feel it. Outside Buckingham Palace, the first signs of mourning began to take shape. People arrived in silence, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Some carried bouquets wrapped in paper. Others brought photographs of happier royal days. Many arrived empty-handed, unsure what to do except stand near the place that now felt at the centre of national grief. The air was cold, still, and heavy with quiet sobs and the soft hum of reporters broadcasting live. Daily life paused. Transactions stopped mid-sentence in schools and shops. Teachers struggled to explain what had happened to wide-eyed children in small towns, while in cities, strangers whispered anxiously, "Have you heard?" People stepped outside their homes just to hear church bells tolling in unison, the sound rolling across fields, streets, and cityscapes alike, a haunting reminder of shared sorrow. Britain had mourned before, but this felt different, immediate, collective, and deeply personal. Social media exploded with hashtags carrying the names of the royals, trending worldwide. Photos of Prince William and his family filled timelines, accompanied by messages of prayer, disbelief, and compassion. Celebrities, politicians, and citizens alike joined the chorus, creating a global echo of heartbreak, unity, and grief. As the day darkened, the crowd outside the palace grew. Candles flickered in the wind, flowers blanketed the pavement, and handwritten messages were pinned to the gates. A mother held her daughter's hand as they placed a single rose among hundreds. Elderly couples stood silently, tears streaking faces that had followed this family for generations. Palace lights glowed behind iron gates, reflections dancing on wet stone. The announcement had revealed no details, only emotion. But that was enough to shake a nation long accustomed to royal stoicism. This moment was unlike any other. The fortress had shown its heart. For the first time in living memory, the monarchy and its people grieved together, united, not by tradition, but by shared sorrow beneath the storm now raging beyond the palace gates. The storm outside rose instantly, like a wave no one could brace for. Within minutes of the announcement, people gathered quietly, uncertain at first, drawn by an unspoken pull, a shared instinct to be near the heart of the tragedy. Some carried flowers still wrapped in paper, others brought photographs of the royal family, and many came empty-handed, faces pale with disbelief, quiet sobs mixed with low murmurs, the click of cameras, and shuffling feet on rain-soaked pavement. Time seemed to slow across small towns and great cities alike. Televisions flickered in living rooms. Radios whispered the same devastating words. Teachers paused lessons. Shops froze mid-transaction. Strangers exchanged glances and murmured, "Have you heard?" The nation seemed suspended between shock and sorrow, unable to fully grasp the scale of what had been lost. The sound of church bells filled the air, from London's cathedrals to tiny chapels in rural villages. Their solemn toll rolled across fields and through city streets. The ringing was not ordered by decree, but born of instinct, an act of shared mourning that transcended ceremony. People stepped outside their homes to listen, standing still as the notes carried on the wind. Each echo was a reminder that grief respects no boundaries. Pain could unite even the most distant hearts across the world. Social media became a torrent of emotion within minutes. Images of Buckingham Palace gates, the royal crest, and the family at the centre of heartbreak flooded timelines. Hashtags carrying their names trended globally in an instant, a digital memorial rising before anyone could process the news. Messages of condolence poured in from every continent. Some offered prayers, others shared photographs of happier times. Countless more simply wrote that they could not believe it. Public figures, celebrities, and world leaders joined ordinary citizens in a collective voice of sorrow that spanned the globe. Outside the palace, thousands gathered, their presence a quiet testament to shared heartbreak. The crowd swelled as the cold wind carried the scent of flowers and burning candle wax. A little girl placed a single rose at the gate, her mother's tears falling silently beside her. Elderly couples held hands, gazing up at the palace windows as though searching for reassurance that would never come. Police officers moved carefully through the throngs, guiding those who had come to leave tributes. There was no protest, no anger, only the aching quiet of shared loss. As evening fell, Buckingham Palace glowed behind the iron gates. Its golden lights shimmered against the darkening sky. Reporters spoke softly, their voices barely above whispers, unsure how to describe what everyone already felt. The monarchy had always seemed unshakable, a symbol of endurance and composure. Yet on this day, its walls appeared fragile, its grandeur softened by grief. The silence, the tears, and the flicker of candles spoke more clearly than any official statement could. The storm beyond the gates had arrived, not one of fury, but heartbreak. Inside the palace, the royal family, long masters of composure and protocol, had been reduced to raw grief. Those within described an atmosphere so heavy it felt almost physical, as if sorrow itself had taken shape and lingered in every corridor. Advisors walked quietly, voices hushed to whispers. Even long-serving staff who had witnessed triumphs and crises were brought to tears in private corners. The guards, trained to remain expressionless, seemed weighed down by mourning. In the early hours, an emergency meeting was held in one of the palace's private chambers. Senior royals gathered beneath cold, shimmering chandeliers, faces drawn and pale. Advisors outlined what little could be done, though there were no solutions to ease the pain. The king sat at the head of the table, motionless for much of the meeting. He said nothing, his gaze fixed downward, as though words had abandoned him. A lifetime of mastering control, learning never to waver before the public, had been stripped away. On this day, he was not a monarch, but a father, broken by grief. Those present described the moment as unbearable. Queen Camilla sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. Even after the discussion ended, the room remained silent. No one moved, no one dared breathe too loudly. When the meeting finally dissolved, family members drifted away. Their footsteps echoed through the long marble halls. Duty, once their anchor, offered no comfort. Now they faced not matters of state, but the raw truth of loss, something no crown could shield them from. Elsewhere in the palace, Prince William and Princess Kate moved quietly through the day. William, raised within these same walls, was said to be shattered but remained focused on his children, trying to protect them from the weight pressing down on their home. Kate, steadfast as ever, held the family together with quiet, unshakable strength. They were seen briefly at a window overlooking the courtyard, their silhouettes framed by fading afternoon light, both staring into the distance with expressions of exhaustion and disbelief. Messages of condolence poured in from across the world, heads of state, celebrities, and ordinary citizens sending words of love and sympathy. Yet within the palace, time felt frozen. Footsteps were rare, meals went untouched, and even the ticking of clocks seemed louder than usual. Staff whispered that they had never witnessed such stillness, such heartbreak. As night fell over London, the palace lights dimmed one by one. The king remained in solitude, declining briefings and visitors. Buckingham Palace, long a symbol of strength and endurance, had become something far more human, a house in mourning. Behind its walls, the family that carried a nation's hopes could do nothing but grieve. Not as royals bound by duty, but as a father, a mother, and children mourning a loss too deep for words. For Prince William, the tragedy was not only a test of duty, but the breaking point of a burden he had carried for far too long. Those closest to him noticed signs in the weeks before the announcement. Public appearances had grown fewer, smiles more strained, his voice quieter. He continued to show up, shake hands, and lead as expected. But behind the calm surface, something inside him had begun to fracture. The weight of expectation, the pressure of leadership, and the pain of personal loss had finally become too heavy. When the news broke, William reportedly spent hours alone in his study at Adelaide Cottage, away from cameras and advisors. His phone rang constantly, messages from dignitaries and family arriving one after another, but for a time he answered none. He sat in silence, staring over gardens where his children often played, trying to process a reality that had descended with shocking speed. For a man who had spent his adult life balancing the roles of father, husband, and future king, the moment was surreal and unbearable. Those who know him say William has always carried his emotions quietly, learning early that the public watches not only what royals say, but how they appear. Composure became part of his armor, a shield built over decades of scrutiny. Yet this time, the armor cracked. When he appeared before the cameras later that day, his eyes were red, expression pale, no rehearsed smile, no polished tone. The nation saw not the heir of the throne, but a man standing on the edge of grief. Princess Kate stood beside him, steady and graceful, her hand occasionally brushing his to lend strength. Her presence seemed to anchor him, reminding him that even in despair they were not alone. Together, they faced the cameras, voices trembling as they spoke. William thanked the public for their kindness and compassion, his words deliberate, heavy with emotion, pausing as if the effort to continue was almost too much. When he asked for space for his family to grieve, it was not a formal royal request, but the plea of a husband and father trying to protect those he loved most. After the brief appearance, they returned to Windsor, where the world's eyes could no longer reach them. A short note was released, stating the couple would step back temporarily from public duties. Behind closed doors, William spent the evening with his children, maintaining routine to shield them from the storm outside, a father quietly holding his family together amidst grief. Yet even within that effort, the ache remained visible. The boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin now faced another heartbreak, this time as a man carrying both a crown and the unbearable weight of loss. In that moment, the world saw not a future king, but a human being brought to his breaking point, raw and exposed. Holding his family close, he sought strength in the only place left to look: love. The king's dilemma for King Charles was clear. The tragedy that had swept through the palace was not just a national crisis, but a deeply personal wound. The monarch, who had spent a lifetime preparing to lead, now faced the moment when duty collided head-on with heartbreak behind the solemn walls of Buckingham Palace. He walked the long corridors in silence, his thoughts torn between the responsibilities of a ruler and the grief of a father. The country looked to him for reassurance, yet within those walls, he mourned alongside his family. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier. Advisers met in hushed sessions, urging him to address the nation, to find the words that could steady a grieving country. Every prepared speech felt too formal, too hollow. How could he speak as a monarch when his heart was breaking as a man? He sat at his desk, crossing out lines written for him and scribbling new ones in his own hand. When the final version was finished, it no longer sounded like the voice of a king. It was the voice of a father trying to find meaning in loss. As night fell, the palace prepared for the broadcast. Cameras were brought into one of its oldest rooms, lined with gold frames and velvet curtains. The king sat at a polished wooden desk, dressed in black, hands clasped tightly. Those in the room said the silence was almost unbearable. When the red light blinked on, he lifted his head and began to speak. His voice was soft, unsteady, yet painfully sincere. Gone were the rehearsed tones of a royal address. Instead, he spoke from the heart. He thanked the nation for its compassion, acknowledged the depth of its grief, and admitted that even a king could not find words for such sorrow. "We are all, in the end, human," he said quietly, pausing to steady his voice. That simple line echoed across living rooms, pubs, hospitals, and cafes, carried through televisions and radios with a weight no speechwriter could have crafted. Families sat together in silence, faces illuminated by the glow of screens. For the first time in generations, the monarchy's barrier of distance fell away. The king had revealed not the crown, but the man beneath it. When the address ended, there was no applause, only quiet reflection outside the palace. Thousands stood in the cold, some crying, others holding flickering candles. The king's words had not erased the pain, but they had done something far greater. They had united a nation in shared humanity. In the days that followed, his words lingered like a gentle echo, a reminder of strength found not in titles but in honesty. King Charles appeared solemn, yet steadfast, carrying the sorrow of a nation with grace. In that moment, he reminded Britain that true strength does not lie in grandeur or ceremony, but in compassion and the courage to show that even kings can break. In the days following the announcement, the shock that had gripped the nation slowly gave way to questions. People wanted to understand what had really happened behind Buckingham Palace gates. The silence after the king's speech only deepened curiosity. Whispers began surfacing in newsrooms and across social media. Slowly, Carefully, fragments of truth began to emerge. The palace confirmed that the tragedy was not the result of scandal, politics, or power struggles, but something far more personal. It was not about duty, image, or ceremony. It was about loss, a loss that had cut deep into the heart of the royal family, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Those who had seen the family in the days before the announcement spoke of exhaustion. Prince William, usually composed and steady, appeared distant. Princess Kate, known for her poise, seemed unusually quiet. Court officials described an unspoken tension lingering in palace corridors, where royal life had always been rehearsed and orderly. A private storm was gathering. For years, the weight of duty had been building, pressing down on every member of the family. Each appearance, each smile, each carefully worded statement had come at a cost. When the truth finally came to light, it was devastatingly simple. A personal loss, profound and unexpected, had struck at the very core of the family. It was something they could not control, something that stripped away layers of ceremony and left only raw humanity. Those close to the royals said grief moved through the palace like a shadow, touching everyone from senior aides to new staff members. The tragedy had not only broken hearts, but exposed how fragile the balance between duty and personal life had become. Royal observers reflected on the years leading up to this moment, the endless scrutiny, public demands, and impossible expectations that had all taken their toll. The monarchy had always projected stability, but behind the facade, cracks were forming. The pressure to remain perfect, to honour tradition while evolving with the times, had created a quiet suffering few outside the walls could understand. When the devastating event occurred, those cracks split wide open. Upon hearing the truth, the public responded not with anger or gossip, but with compassion. The tragedy was too human, too universal to be treated as spectacle. People saw themselves reflected in the family's pain, parents who had lost children, siblings holding one another together in the aftermath. The realization that even the royal family, often seen as unshakable, could experience such heartbreak drew the nation closer than ever. As the palace requested privacy, one message began to resonate across the United Kingdom. The monarchy, for all its grandeur, is made up of people no different from anyone else. Their crowns and titles could not shield them from the weight of sorrow. The truth behind the tragedy was not scandal or mystery, but something painfully familiar. The reminder that even in palaces, hearts can break, and no amount of power can protect a family from loss. All across the United Kingdom, a hush fell over daily life. It began in London, where the usually bustling streets near Buckingham Palace became silent avenues of grief. Strangers stood side by side, united in sorrow, connected by an invisible thread of shared heartbreak, each heart feeling the weight of a royal family mourning in plain sight. Their eyes fixed on the palace gates that now stood as a symbol of loss. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of roses and rain, yet no one moved away. Some wept openly, while others simply stared in disbelief, unable to find words. The tragedy that had struck the royal family no longer felt like theirs alone. It belonged to the nation. Across cities in Britain, the same scenes unfolded. In Edinburgh, mourners gathered outside Holyrood Palace, placing Scottish thistles among bouquets of lilies. In Cardiff, cathedral bells tolled through narrow streets as candles were lit in churches. In Belfast, crowds stood silently outside government buildings holding photographs of the royal family. As the Union Jack flew at half-mast, it was as if the entire United Kingdom had paused, holding its breath in collective grief. Cathedrals and churches opened their doors, offering quiet spaces for reflection. Long queues formed outside St. Paul's and Westminster Abbey, where the flicker of candlelight painted ancient walls in warm gold. Inside, people of all ages knelt together, some to pray, others simply to sit in stillness. Clergy spoke softly of compassion, shared humanity, and the power of unity in grief. Everywhere, strangers held hands or embraced, finding solace in a shared heartache that crossed generations and backgrounds. The words resonated far beyond religion. It did not matter whether people were believers or not. The loss had touched something deep, something undeniably human. Even those who had long doubted the monarchy found themselves mourning in pubs, classrooms, and offices. Conversations shifted from politics to empathy. People spoke not of crowns or titles, but of a family that had given everything to a nation and lost something. No title could replace the monarchy. Once distant, it now appeared heartbreakingly real. There was no divide between loyalists and critics, only shared sorrow. Generations came together in ways not seen for years. Elderly citizens who remembered Queen Elizabeth II's coronation stood beside young people who had grown up seeing William and Kate as symbols of modern hope. Parents lifted their children onto their shoulders so they could glimpse the palace gates, explaining quietly that they were witnessing a moment history would never forget. The tragedy had erased age, class, and belief. It had united millions in compassion. In towns and villages, vigils burned through the night. The glow of candles reflected in puddles. Hymns drifted through the air. Some left toys and letters written in a child's hand, while others tied ribbons to fences in the royal colours, fluttering softly in the breeze. Volunteers brought blankets and hot drinks to those waiting outside, strangers supporting strangers in quiet solidarity. For the first time in a long while, the United Kingdom felt like one family. The grief was vast, but it was shared. And in that unity, there was something quietly healing. Days turned into nights, and still the palace remained silent. The Union Jack hung at half-mast, unmoving even in the wind, as if the nation itself had paused outside the gates. The sea of flowers grew higher, spilling across the pavement in a mosaic of colour and sorrow. Photographs of the royal family, some faded and others freshly printed, were tucked among the bouquets. Candles flickered despite the drizzle, wax pooling over the stone, each one whispering a prayer, not only for what had been lost, but for what lay ahead. Britain was mourning, yet it was also waiting for a sign, a word, a glimpse of what the future would bring inside Buckingham Palace. Time moved differently. The vast halls, usually alive with movement and ceremony, had fallen into near silence. Footsteps echoed where laughter once lingered. The king remained mostly out of sight, appearing briefly for meetings before retreating to private quarters. Prince William and Princess Kate had withdrawn entirely, spending time with their children away from the public eye. For the first time in generations, the monarchy had vanished from view, hidden behind its own walls of grief. The public began to ask the question no one wanted to speak aloud. What happens now? Newspapers tried to answer, printing headlines filled with speculation about the crown's future. Political commentators debated the stability of the institution, while royal experts spoke cautiously about transitions and the uncertain path ahead for a monarchy that had always represented permanence. The uncertainty felt foreign, even frightening. Yet beneath the questions, a quiet understanding began to grow. The tragedy had changed everything. The monarchy, long regarded as the steadfast heart of the nation, had revealed something. It had spent centuries guarding its humanity. Yet the pain etched across the royal family's faces had stripped away the illusion of untouchable grandeur. For once, the crown did not seem eternal or distant. It seemed fragile, real, and profoundly human. It was a moment of reckoning for an institution built on tradition. Could a monarchy that showed emotions still command the reverence of its people? Or was this the beginning of a new legacy? One not built on ceremony, but on connection across the country. Conversations shifted from grief to reflection in homes and cafes. People spoke softly about the future. Some believed that the tragedy had made the royals more relatable, while others feared that the pain might forever alter the balance between duty and family. The uncertainty hung in the air like mist, touching everyone who had followed the story with heavy hearts. As night fell over London, the palace lights glowed faintly through the fog. The sound of footsteps faded, leaving only the murmur of the crowd beyond the gates. In that stillness, a truth settled over the nation. Crowns may symbolize power, but beneath them beat hearts that can break like anyone else's. The hum of distant voices, whispers of remembrance, and occasional sighs became the soundtrack of a nation mourning together. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. The future of the monarchy would be shaped not by tradition alone, but by humanity. It had finally allowed the world to see that the palace stands silent tonight, its lights dim against the London sky. Yet the echoes of this tragedy continue to stir hearts across the world. The story of the royal family has always been one of duty and endurance, but this moment revealed something far deeper. the fragile humanity beneath the crown. As Britain looks to the future, one question remains. Can love and unity rebuild what loss has broken? The world will be watching, and so will history. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below, comment your feelings, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video for more untold truths behind the monarchy. Even the mightiest families remind us, no one is beyond the reach of heartbreak. The nation may grieve, but it also learns that in shared sorrow we find connection, compassion, and perhaps even the strength to face tomorrow.